and we are being live streamed. Good. Wani, do you want to start the session?
Yes, I can. Welcome everyone to today's session. We are here with 3 speakers for the topic of the current scene of alternative protein in Asia and other regions, to learn more about what is in store for us in the coming future. So today's speakers are Valerie Pang from the Good Food Institute, Sincha Neeson from GAIA, and Cal. I'll introduce them just before they start. For the first session, we will be having first Valerie. Valerie is the Innovation Associate at GFI APAC, Asia Pacific Good Food Institute. Headquartered in Singapore, the Good Food Institute APAC is Asia's leading alternative protein think tank, accelerating a shift away from industrial animal agriculture through open access food science, research and development, corporate engagement, and policy advocacy. Valerie is involved in community building, helping to grow the ecosystem in this region, and supporting startups and investors in the alternative protein industry. We will be having Valerie here to share with us why is there an urgency in embracing alternative proteins today. You would also learn more about what alternative protein entails in terms of plant-based technology, cultivated meat, and fermentation types of protein. So without further ado, I'll let Valerie share more with us about this.
Hi, everyone. Really nice to meet you today, and I'm very excited to share with you more about alternative protein. And so let me just share my screen with you. So 1 second. So give me 1 second. Let me share my screen. All right. Okay. So hopefully you're able to see my screen right now. Okay, so yeah, I'm Valerie. I'm the Innovation Associate at GFI APAC, and my talk today is an introduction to alternative proteins. So just a very short introduction about GFI, Good Food Institute. We're an international network of nonprofits that's developing the roadmap for a sustainable, secure, and just protein supply. So we're supporting the alternative protein industry in 3 ways in terms of science and technology, in advancing open access research in alternative proteins, and creating a thriving research and training ecosystem for alternative protein. We also work on corporate engagement, where we work with other companies and investors around the world to drive investment, accelerate innovation in this space, and help to develop businesses in this industry. And then thirdly, we work on policy, where we advocate for fair policy and increase public research funding for alternative proteins. We have different offices around the world. I'm in the Asia Pacific office based in Singapore, and then there's other offices in US, Brazil, India, Europe, Israel, and a partner organization in China as well. So why is there a need for alternative proteins? Like, what is the urgency? Why is it so important? So the question really is about how can we feed 10 billion people by 2050 in a sustainable way, efficient and safe manner. And sustainability-wise, industrial animal agriculture is one of the top 2 to 3 most significant contributors to environmental issues. Efficiency-wise, it takes a lot of calories of food fed to animals before you can produce meat. And then safety-wise, farm animals actually consume more than 2 times the number of antibiotics as humans, which causes the issue of increasing antimicrobial resistance. So as we all know, like global meat demand is actually showing no signs of slowing down. By 2050, we'll have the increase in world population, but the demand for meat will also increase by a lot. And there has been skyrocketing meat production and demand. We can see here that global meat production will continue to increase, and meat demand in Asia is going to increase as well. But growing meat, or like having growing animals for food, is actually a very inefficient use of planetary resources. Basically, most of the land that we have for agriculture is being used for livestock, but actually it only contributes to 33% of the protein supply. So it's not a very efficient use of the land and resources we have. Also, there's a lot of like waste as well, in terms of the fact that we're feeding chickens, pigs, cows, and other animals a lot of calories in, and only a small percentage of that, like 13% for chicken, 9% for pigs, 3% for cows, is converted into food. So that basically results in a huge waste, food waste, and it's not efficient at all. And so when we look at the environmental impacts, like beef example uses 44 times as much land as say plant-based meat. Chicken is using 23 times water. Pork is using 20 times, causing 20 times the amount of air pollution. And just in general, greenhouse gas emissions as well, like beef is 41 times more polluting to the environment than plant-based meat. So our theory of change is that instead of asking consumers to give up meat, which is eggs or dairy, which is really it's hard to change people's behavior, how can we create alternative proteins that taste and look the same as meat, cost the same as meat, so that it will be available everywhere and be adopted by consumers around the world. So now I've kind of basically touch upon why is it so important for us to look to alternative protein? Why do we have to shift away from meat production? And so I'll go into what are the types of alternative protein that's out there. So there is basically kind of 3 categories of alternative protein. One is plant-based, another is cultivated, and the third one is fermentation. So I'll go into each one of them. So first we have plant-based meat, and this is like meat, eggs, and dairy that's produced directly from plants. They are also composed of protein, fat, vitamins, and minerals, and they look, taste, and cook like conventional meat, just that they're made from plants. And so it's kind of like, how can you make plant protein kind of be like animal protein? And the process is basically kind of, you start off with source selection, finding different crops that are suitable, optimizing it. So with this raw materials, you create like, you isolate and functionalize them by using mechanical and chemical processes, like example, high moisture extrusion, in order to create the texture that is like meat. And so you have the end product formulation, manufacturing, and you put together different ingredients and processes so that it comes out kind of looking and tasting like actual meat itself. Sorry. So some examples of some startups in Asia, there's like GrowthWell, Tyndall, and Green Monday. I won't go into detail. I think Mikhail is going to cover that in his talk. So I just list these examples of plant-based products. And as I mentioned before about how it's like much more sustainable, it will help to reduce land use by 96% for chicken, water use by 96% for beef, air pollution wise, there's a 95% reduction, and greenhouse gas emissions, we are seeing like almost 90% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So the next category is cultivated meat, and that is meat that's produced directly from animal cells. So this meat cultivation is kind of the same biological process that happens inside an animal by providing cells with the warmth and the basic nutrients required, just that it's not actually an animal. It's grown in like a lab. And so how it works is kind of, you take a small sample of cells from an animal and you put it into a bioreactor along with cell culture media, and you provide the necessary nutrients for the cells to grow. And then the tissue of the cells will start growing, and then you can kind of change the condition so that it will either become muscle, fat, or connective tissue. And in that way, it will you can kind of create a slab of meat. Yeah. And we're seeing that, over the years, there has been so much growth, and there has been a lot of cultivated meat companies that have appeared over the past few years. And we're seeing like the world's first like burger, meatball, fish, shrimp dumpling, steak, etc. So there has been a lot of like scientific development and a lot of new products. Not all of it's out in the market yet, but at least the technology is there. So it's waiting for kind of regulatory approval, and then you'll start seeing it appear you can start buying it, starting with Singapore. Singapore is the first country to allow for the sale of cultivated meat, but other countries will follow suit in the future. And that also helps to reduce environmental impacts as well. A bit less than plant-based meat, but still quite a substantial amount of reduction in land use and air pollution and chemicals. And then the third category of alternative protein is fermentation, derived proteins. And that's kind of like a technology that allows for the production of protein sources or functional ingredients, where you can use microorganisms such as fungi and bacteria to actually kind of express specific proteins or fats. And there are kind of three categories of fermentation. There's traditional fermentation, which is using intact live microorganisms. There's biomass fermentation, which is using the fast growth and high protein content of microorganisms to produce large protein quantities. And then there's precision fermentation, which is using microbial hosts to produce specific functional ingredients. And different companies are using different kinds of fermentation technology to create their alternative protein products. So ultimately, we think that animal product alternatives will occur along a spectrum. There's going to be like plant-based, cultivated, but there might be kind of hybrid products where you combine the plant-based burger with cultivated fat, or you could have plant-based and fermentation combined. So although I said that there are three main categories, like we think that the products could kind of combine the different technologies together. Yeah, and we see that there's a lot of like investment growth in the area. There's been $5 billion invested in alternative protein. And even in Asia, there's also a huge jump in investment as well. It was almost 100% increase from 2020 to 2021. So in recent years, we've definitely made a lot of leaps and bounds, but I do think that ample white space still remains. There's so much to do in the alternative protein space. So for whoever's listening, I want to encourage you that this is definitely an industry that is growing and very exciting and very impactful that you can go into. I'll share with you some resources and opportunities. You can basically you can consider, we think that universities can be engines for accelerating alternative protein innovation. So if you're still a university student, you can consider applying for next year's GFI's alternative protein project and start a student club in your university for alternative protein. You can explore career resources by going to gfi.org/student guide. So yeah, check out this website. It has a lot of resources for you as a student. And you can also see industry resources. Just go to gfi.org or gfi-apac.org, and you'll see a lot of things you can read up on to learn more about this industry and find out how to get involved. And we also have technical resources as well if you want to learn more about the science behind alternative protein. So yeah, we definitely at GFI APAC, we encourage everyone to consider working in alternative proteins or getting involved. We think that it's a way for you to make an impact and have a very exciting career as well. So hopefully this lets you know more about alternative protein, kind of why it's important, and a bit more about what is alternative protein, what are the different categories. So yeah, I hope this talk was helpful, and you can contact me at valeriep@gfi.org with any questions. So hope I didn't exceed the time. Thank you so much for listening to me share. And yeah, look forward to answering any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valerie. We will be having 2 more speakers share with us, and then we will get into the Q&A. The next speaker that we will be having will be Sincha Nissen from GAIA. GAIA is the global action in the interests of animals. Sincha is the consultant at GAIA, and she focuses on cell-based meat as project manager there. As a child, she was always surrounded by animals, and advocating for more animal welfare has always been an important part of her life. Sincha believes that we need a radical change in our food system. Therefore, we need to rethink our current supply chains and production systems. She has been working on various projects, and one of them is a collaboration between GAIA and Eurogroup for Animals this year, where they hosted Europe's first ever symposium on cultivated meat and precision fermentation. This involved scientific experts, industry representatives, and advocates discussing the future of our food system. Today, she will be sharing with us more why, as an animal rights organization, they support the idea of cell-based meats, what will be the social impact of alternative proteins like plant-based alternative or cell-based meat, and how can government support this transition. So over to Sincha to share with us more.
Thank you for that introduction. Let me share my screen as well, like this. Can you see my screen now? Is it visible?
Yes, it's good.
Okay, perfect. First of all, congratulations to the organizers of this event. It is really very interesting to follow. I would like to tell you more about why GAIA as an organization. Let me check how I can advance because it gets stuck. Yes, okay. So why we as an animal organization foster the transition towards cell-based meat and what we do for this. So GAIA was founded 30 years ago by Michel van den Bos and Anne de Greef, and they wanted to gather all the people who were defending animal welfare and animal rights. We believe that it is very important to work on building a human-animal relationship that is based on justice and humanity and respect. What do? We campaign and demonstrate organized animal suffering. So in the case of abuse that is tolerated by the society, we denounce the situation in public and we actively offer solutions. We go into the streets, we confront people with images and videos of what is actually going on with the animals to bring it to the attention and to bring a difference in the comportment of the people. We believe that society with respect for animal life contributes to a society which has respect for the weak and vulnerable in general. Our campaigns are always very well documented and backed up with facts by professional and expert people. As my colleague before from GFI mentioned, the global meat consumption is going up globally, and unless, well, we see in Belgium that I think it's because of the work of Anne and Michel, we see that people are eating a little bit less meat than before. We have more flexitarians than we used to have before, but still, when we look globally, meat consumption is going up, and so it is very, very important that we find a solution for the industrial meat consumption. Why do we support the idea of cell-based meat? As I explained before, we try to fight systems that are accepted by the public, which involve a lot of animal suffering. So the meat industry obviously is a place where many animals suffer, and so we believe that if we can find a way to replace the meat industry, that a lot of animals will be helped. So that is why we believe that there has never been a bigger opportunity to reduce or phase out animal killing and animal suffering. We had some research being conducted, and this shows that few people are willing to change to a completely plant-based diet. So that is why we believe that it is important to have an alternative. Maybe people want to eat less meat, but the biggest group of people are not willing to let go of meat. So we need cell-based agriculture and also precision fermentation as being part of the solution to eliminate suffering of animals in the food industry. Now, how do we do that, and how do we believe that a successful transition can be reached? We think it is very important that we use a holistic approach. We need all the stakeholders to be on board, and this means that we need to reach the consumers, the entrepreneurs, the governments, which is a very important stakeholder in this process, the farmers, the big farmers, the smaller farmers, the retailers, and other stakeholders. In regard to the farmers, I will come back to this later, but there is a very interesting website which is called respectfarms.com, which is really interesting to visit. It will show an alternative for the smaller farmers, because we see that many farmers feel threatened by the idea of cell-based meat, and Respect Farms want to reach the farmers to show them that there is a future for them as well with cell-based meat. So we believe that this is really very important. GAIA has, in 2019, we invited Paul Shapiro to Belgium. We translated his book into Flemish and into French, and we also invited him to the television program The Afspraak. Paul Shapiro was able to explain in a very, very easy way to the general public who was aware of the concept of cell-based meat. He could explain it in a very accessible way what it was, because for many people cell-based meat is still like Frankenstein meat. In Belgium in general, we tend to believe that what is natural is good. And so people think that cell-based meat is not natural, it is strange, and they conceive it as something weird. And I think that it is really very interesting to see the YouTube video and to hear how he explains that this not a natural at all. In fact, it is a logic way to evolve like this. Like, we don't go today, if we want to have ice, we go to our refrigerator and we take ice out of the fridge. Years ago, we didn't do it like that. We went to the lake and we would only find ice there. And I think it is very logical how he puts it in. Like, we don't use the horse and the carriage anymore for our transportation. So he explains that cell-based meat is a very logical step to cut out the animal, to stop feeding it for months, for years, and then slaughter it. So I think this is really very interesting to see. We also do several surveys in Belgium to follow up how people conceive cultivated meat. And we see, so we did it like 2 years in a row, and we see a positive evaluation, I'm sorry. We see now that the first impression of people is quite good, like 42% is positive about it and only 15% rejects it. So a quite large part, 43%, they don't have an opinion yet. Even 35% say that it is quite attractive. 24 doesn't like it. More and more people have the intention to buy. We see that 39 people are willing to try it now. 25 still say they will not buy it. And we see that in the group of people who are willing to try it, it is more the younger people who are open to the idea of cell-based meat. Young people who have studied is the largest group that are willing to try it. And the most important reason for that group is animal welfare and the environment. Maybe it's important to state out that this is really something that we notice in Belgium. We see that in other European countries, there might be another reason to try cell-based meat. But in Belgium, the most important reason is animal welfare and the environment. We also invited 2 years ago 6 Belgian journalists to Israel to taste cell-based meat. So we want to facilitate and to foster the concept of cell-based meat in our country. And one of the ways we wanted to do that is by inviting journalists and to actually have them to taste it. We had several reactions on that in the newspapers, which were really good. People said that the journalists said that it was kind of strange, but in fact, once they tasted it, there was no difference at all, because in fact it is real meat. So it's logic that there is not a difference in taste. We also started 2 websites in Belgium, or 1 website, but in 2 languages, kweekvlees.be and viandcultivé.be. There we make sure that it's uploaded very regularly every month with news articles about evaluation on cell-based meat. So like, for instance, we communicated that very recently in April this year in the Netherlands, the government approved tastings, which is completely new in Europe for us. The Netherlands will be the first country where cell-based meat can actually be tasted, which is incredibly good news. So we launched this on our website for people who are interested, that they can follow all the new evaluations on cell-based meat. We also facilitate contact between the government and startup companies, like we did for Piece of Meat. This was also in the press. So Piece of Meat is now a part of an Israeli company, but we still have a production facility starting up in Hoboken in Belgium. As the introduction revealed, we had in April this year a symposium organized by GAIA and Eurogroup for Animals together. We had several speakers in this symposium. Jane Goodall was our keynote speaker, and then we had several scientists who were speaking about the work and the progression that they made on. We also had Robert E. Jones, who is the president of Cellular Agriculture Europe, who came to explain cell-based meat to our participants. The people who we invited were NGOs, political people, people who are interested in cell-based meat in general, journalists, and we had very good comments on it. We had to stop the registrations because we had too many people who were interested. So we were really very happy about the fact that so many people were interested about this in Belgium now. We also reach out to environmental NGOs to see what they think about cultivated meat, and to know what their objection might be. We see that many misconceptions about cell-based meats exist. So we try to go in contact with them and to see what they think. If some misconceptions are there, we try to give answers or to explain more about things what they are still questioning about. So what we see is for the NGOs that agricultural or agroecological farming is their #1 priority. That many organic farmers don't want to get involved in cell-based meat because they feel it is unnatural. They fear that cultivated meat is going to be huge and that only the large players will be involved and that the small farmers will drop out. So that's why we think that the project of Respect Farms is really very important. And so we want to clear out doubts about the environmental impact that we do by studies that we ask experts, to conduct. I will come back to this later. And we also see that the organizations in the French-speaking part, excuse me, in the French-speaking part of Belgium are more critical than in the Flemish-speaking part. So we in the conversations that we have, we see some concerns. I have listed them up here, so you can see them. People are worried if cell-based meat will involve animal suffering, if it will harm the environment. What about traditions and animal breeds? We see that tradition in culture is in food is really very important. So people are worried about that. They are also worried about the fact what with the animals like the pigs and the cows and the chickens, if they will not be needed anymore for meat, what will happen with them? Will they disappear out of the landscape? So they have many questions, and based on these questions, we have asked to researchers to work out several studies. I'm sorry. I have listed up the main studies that were conducted. The first was done by CE Delft, by Pelle Sinke. He was the responsible expert on this study, and it involved the impact on the environment. So with this study, we want to answer the questions of the NGOs. There was studied how future meat will have an impact on the environment. They studied on land use, on energy consumption, on water use. It's a very interesting study. Then we have Ipsos. It was more a local study on the perception of cell-based meat. I spoke about the results a little bit earlier. So we saw that many young people who have studied were open to the idea of cell-based meat. Then we also had an interesting study on the social impact of cell-based meat, which was conducted mainly by 3 Brazilian experts and also by Hermes Sanctorum for Europe. The study was in 3 parts, and I will come back to it later if I still have time. I think I need to look at my time. And the 4th one was where Christopher Bryant and Hermes Sanctorum compared consumer attitudes towards plant-based meat, cultured meat, and cultivated meat in 2 consecutive years in Belgium. So in the Brazilian study, we see that there are many opportunities. There are like 9 opportunities and 5 challenges. One of the, I will go a little bit quicker. Let me check. I will also give you the web link so you can see it more in detail, but the benefits include that there will, when there is a transition, we see that the quality of the jobs will be better. People will have more satisfaction of their work, and there will be an improvement of their working conditions. There will be also the possibility of higher wages in certain change stages, and there will be a very important development in human capital. Of course, there are also some challenges. I'm sorry, I don't see. Yes, this one is missing. I will explain it. So, so what are the challenges? Of course, there is the mentality of the people towards cell-based meats. They are afraid that it will take all the jobs. So it is really important that the government helps in this transition, that there will be ways to learn these new jobs, that there will be new education for these people. One of the challenges is also that people are afraid that animals will disappear. So we believe that there is very important role in informing people. Of course, this will not be the case. We still need animals to be there to take the biopsies, but we need to reduce the animals. So there will be less animals, and the animals that will be there, they will have better conditions, and they will be more healthy, and there will be no use of antibiotics, for instance, anymore. I think that I have to stop here, because otherwise I will be over my time. I would like to thank everybody for their attention, and please let me know if you have any questions. You can reach me on the email address transitions@gaia.be.
Thank you very much, Cynthia, for sharing with us your experiences over in Belgium. And next up, we will be having Michael Clark. Let me introduce him before he starts sharing with us. Michael is a founding partner of Derived Ventures, the first VC fund dedicated entirely to alternative protein startups in Asia-Pacific region. Derived has backed founders of 10 plant-based, cell-based, and fermentation early-stage startups in this region, and are planning to support another 15 to 20 in the next few years. Michael is also the founder and editor of Food Now, a leading newsletter covering the alternative protein market in Asia-Pacific. For this session, he'll be sharing with us about the role of VCs and notable startups in Asia. Over to Michael. We can't quite hear you, Michael. Sorry. I think I'll let you know when we can hear you. We still can't. All right, we can hear you now.
Can you hear me now? Yes.
Yes,
All
we
right.
can.
I changed
Thank
my
you.
mic. Let me see if I can find the. Sorry, just give me a second before I share my screen. Does it work? Can you see?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. Let me see. Okay. Okay. You can see my screen, but not my notes, right?
Not your notes, yes. We do see
Okay.
the bar at the top, but I think we're doing all right.
But that's okay. That's okay. All right. So thanks for having me. And I will share a bit of a VC investor's perspective. I'm as Wani mentioned, I'm investing in early stage alt protein startups, Asia Pacific, via this fund called Derived Ventures, and I'm also covering this topic in my newsletter called Future Food Now. I started this fund with my partner, Simon Newstad. Simon is vegan for over 10 years. He has been animal rights activist like many of you in the audience. And I follow a plant-based lifestyle for close to 10 years right now. So we are both motivated by animal welfare and the environment. So what is the role that investors have to play in all of this transition? The sort of a preface is that habits and cultures are very, very strong forces that are very hard to change. So our core thesis is very similar to GFI and GAIA, is that people will still want to eat something that looks and tastes like meat and seafood and dairy. So let's just give it to them, but without animals being harmed in the process. And to accomplish this, we need innovation and new technologies. And it's actually not the first time that technology is helpful here. Look at these examples. Horses has been replaced by tractors earlier in 20th century. Less known example is that insulin for diabetics actually used to come from cows and pigs directly, and it's now almost entirely replaced by fermentation. And it's actually safer for humans, better for animals. But today, innovation is best done by startups rather than incumbent companies. So investors and venture capital specifically can help accelerate this transition by funding alternative protein startups. So that enables the startups to do research and development and go to market with their products. So we are all doing important work here. I think many people in this room, and ours from Derived Ventures is just another way to help, with this shift towards the world where we do not need to eat animals and make more food system more sustainable. I thought that for those who are new to venture capital, I would just briefly explain the basics so you understand sort of how VC work. Maybe what's surprising for many people who are new to this, VCs are also fundraising. Like many of you, I'm sure in the audience for your nonprofits, VCs have to raise money from other investors. So investors that are investing in VC funds can be high net worth individuals, can be private equities, can be foundations, probably some of the same foundations that tend to support nonprofits in this area, or some corporates, for example, food companies or big international conglomerates. So these investors are putting their money into VC funds, and VC funds are either generalist VC funds that invest across different sectors, or specialists like us who invest in specific sectors, specific geographies, for example, in alternative protein, and they have networks and access and knowledge that enables them to pick the best startups and invest in them and return the money to investors down the line. What's interesting is that some VCs describe themselves as impact investors, and I would put us in the same bucket too, because we care and measure our positive impact, not just profit. But this is important to know that this is pretty gray area and there are no clear definitions. It's an evolving space, it's impact investing space. And when startups raise from VCs, they have to figure out whether VCs or investors are a really good fit. So do they know this sector? Are they impact driven if founders care about that? And are they also at the right fit for the right stage? So startups can be very early, can be just getting started. And some VCs like us, we are supporting startups in very early days when they are at their pre-seed or seed stage, just getting started with idea, first prototypes. And some startups are continuing to raise money throughout their growth stage and even just before IPO. And what happens in the end, if a startup is successful, and to be fair, most startups are actually not successful, most fail along the way, unfortunately, but some are successful, make a big change and build a sustainable business. And then they either get acquired by even larger company or go for IPO or public offering on one of the stock exchanges. And that provides funds back to the VC fund and back to investors. So this is how it works in a nutshell. Now let's talk a little bit about alt protein market size and drivers. I think some of these topics have been already covered, but let me just give you my perspective. So if you look at the market share of this alternative proteins among all proteins globally, it's a very small market today. It's only 1 to 2% of a total protein market globally can be considered alt protein. It's even lower in Asia, but across the world, it would be 1 to 2%. Now, if you look at projections, the scenarios usually run somewhere between 10 to 22% in 2032. So it's becoming much bigger, but I think we have to be realistic. This is not going to happen super quickly. This transition will probably take many decades until we get to any meaningful numbers. Now, what is driving this growth is actually not just vegans and vegetarians like us in this room. These are mostly so-called flexitarians or meat reducers who, I'm sure you heard about it, are eating meat, but just reducing their meat consumption. And like the rest of the world, in APAC, in some of the markets in APAC, there are many, pretty high percentage of these meat reducers or flexitarians who are driving the growth of alternative protein in the region. Generally speaking, health is the major factor for globally on top of the environment and animal welfare. But if you look at Asia specifically across different markets in Asia, it is definitely health. Like almost all the reasons on this chart, and these are top 5 reasons in 4 markets across Asia, are health related. So it's good to keep in mind that what mostly drives consumers to try this products is health. And specifically for Asia, it's very often not just health generally, it's specifically low fat or weight loss. You must have seen this chart many times during this event. I think both of my previous speakers used it, and I'm sure it was used many times before. APAC is obviously the largest and fastest growing market globally when it comes to protein generally. About 40% of meat consumption, over 70% of seafood consumption is in APAC. Will probably not come as a surprise that this is driven by a combination of population and GDP growth. So this is interesting data. So data shows clearly that as the wealth grows, in particular, emerging markets, and this is best represented by GDP per capita, the meat consumption goes up. So these are examples for Myanmar, Vietnam, and China. You can see it very, very clearly. Additional factor that is driving this in Asia is food security. So governments want to be more self-reliant with their food production. You have, I'm sure, heard a lot about recent disruptions in supply chains, and even some countries banning exports of animal products, like Malaysia banned recently export of chicken, and Malaysia was a major supplier for Singapore. So these disruptions are happening all the time, and some of it Asian governments decided to introduce certain policies and certain programs to help to build more of a self-reliant food system, and that includes alt protein as part of it. So, for example, Singapore wants to increase its local food production from 10% today to 30% in 2030, and that one of the pillars of this program is alternative protein, and supported by funding and research and regulatory approvals. I'm an investor, so we need to talk about money a little bit, but it is also important element to understand the dynamics of this industry, and because alternative protein is very much fueled by VC money. Without it, we wouldn't see this kind of products and marketing push that we see on the market. So I think somebody mentioned already, I think it was Valerie, that $5 billion was invested globally in alternative protein startups last year. That's more than the previous 3 years combined. What's important, that there are not yet reliable 2022 data or up to date, but we know already that it will be smaller number because the overall VC funding across all the sectors is slowing down. And this is absolutely not just related to alternative protein, more to the macro situation and market trends and public markets basically going down, and this naturally sort of impacts how VC funding looks like globally. Now, in Asia, the story is a little bit different. So last year, we have seen over 300 million invested here, but this year, there's already more money invested in alternative protein startups than last year, but this is relatively small part of the global pie. So about 6% of the total funding last year was in Asia Pacific. But this year, I'm sure the percentage will be significantly higher, as we already have see the trend, and will probably continue to grow. So APAC is one of the fastest growing regions when it comes to alternative protein funding. And when you look at some startups, these are 8 best funded startups right now in Asia. Some of them raised over $100 million. And I'll just use several specific examples just to illustrate what kind of work and what kind of approach are APAC startups taking to this field. So let's start with Omniport, which I'm sure some of you heard about. So the flagship product of this company, of a company called Omni, is ground pork made from soy and rice proteins, and it is designed from ground up for Asian cuisine applications. So I'm sure you heard about companies like Beyond or Impossible and many, many others. They typically address more of a Western style cuisine, and Omniport was designed specifically for Chinese cuisine. So for example, it can be put in dumplings and then stir fries and then many other local dishes. Originally from Hong Kong, now it's available in over 10 markets, including China, and it's already partnering with restaurants, from high-end restaurants to mass market restaurants. What's interesting, the same group runs stores or restaurant, and what I find interesting is that they take this very modern twist. So it's almost looking like an Apple store, very modern type of store, presenting this alternative protein, this plant-based products in a very modern and trendy way. So look at another photo here. It's truly looking like a future of food, essentially, and that's how they position. More recently, they developed the product called plant-based luncheon, which is for Western listeners, it's like Spam. It's quite popular junk food in Asia, and some of Asian markets are actually one of the biggest consumers of this product. So that's a fully plant-based version of it, and they even partnered with McDonald's in Hong Kong and mainland China to develop a breakfast menu featuring this Omni luncheon. The newest product line is Omni seafood line. So some of these products are breaded, and some of them are designed very much for Chinese cuisine applications, unbreaded, easy to steam, something that is quite unique and not easy to find in other Western style products. Another startup that I want to feature is Green Rebel Foods, and for full disclosure, this is one of our investments. And Helga and Max have been running, pioneering vegan restaurant in Indonesia, and now they launched the plant-based meat product line. What's unique about this is, again, catering to local tastes, right? So in this case, these are very Southeast Asian formats. So you can see satay, rendang, or curry style applications, beef and chicken. So this is all designed really for Southeast Asian cuisine, essentially. They were first to partner with Starbucks in Indonesia, beating some of the international players. They are exclusive partner with IKEA, where their products are actually sold at price parity with meat, and have a little bit of a local twist, as you can see on some of these pictures. But they also provide like a traditional IKEA Swedish meatballs in a traditional format, and this is fully plant-based as well. And lastly, I want to briefly mention cultivated meat. I think Valerie mentioned before that Singapore was the first country to approve cultivated meat for sale. It is sold, but on a very small scale, just for everybody to understand. It's literally once a week, that very limited number of portions is available for the general public to purchase. It is also not profitable yet. So the company is selling it at relatively affordable price, but it's losing money on it. So it's still a long way to go. But, you know, for so far, I think they announced that they produced the company that is called Good Meat that got this approval less than 1 ton of the meat, of the cultivated meat last year. But they are setting up a new facility in Singapore to scale up. I've been recently part of a quite historic and another kind of a milestone event in Singapore where 4 different companies, 2 local startups and 3 local startups and 1 international startup have been featuring their cultivated meat products. And it was tasted by about 30 people, VIPs, industry representatives, and so on. So this is the first time in the world that something like this happened, that multiple different startups from different countries were part of essentially one meal, one dinner. So, you know, this kind of milestones and steps are being taken in this industry as it grows. And that most recently, again, from our portfolio, Singapore startup called Meatiply presented the prototype of Asia's first cultivated smoked duck breast. What I want to end with is just some challenges, because it's not all roses and unicorns in our protein industry. And very briefly on this, the main challenges are, you know, it's very important to recreate taste and texture of meat for this flexitarian consumer, but it is quite challenging to do that. So, you know, it's always a moving target. The products are getting improved, but they still need to have a way to go for this consumer to accept it. People are, as we already discussed, you know, people are driven by health and nutrition. So it's very important that these products are, you know, meeting nutritional standards. We're matching at least meat and beating meat on many metrics. And for some, it's already happening. For some metrics, it's still, there's some more work to do. These products are more expensive, which especially is problematic in Asia, which is quite price conscious. Many countries or many consumers are price conscious. And this is a matter of scale and technology again. And we need to also scale up this industry. It's still, as we have seen, very small, 1-2% at max globally. And for scale up, there are facilities needed, more investment needed. So there are challenges around scale up. And one last challenge that is specific for Asia is that meat is like a symbol of affluence for many countries. You know, for many decades, for emerging markets, meat was a luxury product, and it's becoming more accessible. And people who are now sort of considered part of middle class, they want to eat meat. You know, this is for them a symbol of, you know, moving into middle class. So how do we address this with plant-based meat? You know, can plant-based meat have the same perception and play the same role in sort of a you know, people perception about where they belong in the sort of social ladder? So we need more talent in this space to work on these challenges and to build it into very meaningful and impactful industry. So thank you all for all that you are doing for animals and environment. And here are some pointers if you want to stay in touch with me. I'm happy to help if there's anything I can do around alt protein in Asia Pacific. So thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Mikhail, for the sharing. And in summary, I think from Valerie, we've heard the types of alternative protein that exist, gave us a really quick look at the urgency for transitioning. We've also heard from Simcha about the social impact and engagement with government over in Europe. And Mikhail has given us a look at what is actually happening to get access to these products. So right now, we encourage anyone in the audience who have questions to please leave it in the Q&A section. And for a start, maybe I'll start with a question about chickens. Given that chickens are the most farmed land animals in terms of number in the world, and in this region, for both meat and eggs, what is the alternative protein landscape looking like for replacing chicken meat and eggs. Do any of the speakers who has any information to share with us a little bit on this?
Okay, maybe I can share a bit. So for yeah, I think right now we are seeing a lot of both, I think, plant-based alternatives to chicken. So I think there has been quite a few plant-based alternatives to chicken products out there in the market. So for example, there is one by NextGen, which has created a product called Tyndall, which is plant-based chicken. Another company in Singapore called Growthwell also has plant-based chicken, like popcorn chicken. And we're even seeing, like, for example, the big meat producer Tyson, they created this brand called First Pride, which also has chicken nuggets. I think in general, like, I mean, not just that there's also like Rebellious. I think Impossible, I think, is also coming up with plant-based chicken. There basically are quite a few different plant-based chicken like meat alternatives already out there, and even for cultivated meat, the first one that has been launched is cultivated chicken by Eat Just. So yeah, I think there is a lot of alternatives in the market currently, which is good news.
Thanks, Valerie. That's really interesting to know. Is that the same over there in Europe? Cynthia, would you say?
Yes, what we see in Europe is that environmental impact that bovines are more interesting to replace with cultivated meat because their impact is bigger, but we definitely see also interest in chicken and in pork. But I think in Europe it's mainly bovines.
Interesting to know. And I think when it comes to market adoption, we've talked a lot about the exciting developments. Maybe for the audience who are newer and interested in understanding the landscape, given that Asia is so diverse and there are so much socio-political as well as economic differences across the region, what is the market adoption looking like for these products? And as far as I understand, Singapore is the only country that is allowing sales of agricultured meat. So maybe for any speakers who can help us understand about market adoption.
Is this one is it specifically for cultivated meat or just alternative protein in general?
In general, and I think it'd be interesting to zoom in a little bit on cultivated as well.
Right. I can start on that one. So yeah, you're right. Like obviously, Asia is a very diverse region with markets of not only culturally different, but also in terms of stage of development and affluence and so on. So there are several countries that are leading the pack, so to speak, when it comes to consumer adoption, and these are definitely Singapore, Hong Kong. In the broader Asia Pacific, I would include Australia and New Zealand as well, which are kind of more similar to Western markets in this respect. But then we are seeing, I think what we see in terms of adoption in other emerging markets is really best way to look at it as at specific cities. So cities like Jakarta or Bangkok, or increasingly even Manila, and a few other cities, or KL or Kuala Lumpur. These are really consumers in this city start to embrace this these products as well. So we see really partnerships of local startups with this, the restaurants and chains and the supermarkets rolling out products. So this is definitely happening, and these countries are sort of following the trend. And then I think realistically, this will take a while until tier 2, tier 3 cities or rural areas in these countries will actually adopt these products, and partially because of this price problem, right? Like the consumers in the cities are very price sensitive, and this will take a while until the products are affordable enough to get there.
And any comment about the cultivated meat potential for adoption landscape?
I'm happy to take it, but unless Sincha or Valerie.
I think,
Okay.
I mean, yeah, you can take
Valerie,
it,
go ahead.
because I think it's a bit hard to tell right now because it's not really available in the market. Like other than Singapore, no other country can allows for the sale of it. So that's why it's quite hard to figure out. There's not much stats on market adoption as of now. But maybe Mikhail has more insights.
No, I think it's a fair point. So we only see Singapore. There are some consumer studies in the region as well, but usually it looks like it's there are enough of early adopters. A way to think, I think about consumer studies when it comes to any new product, cultivated meat specifically, is that they don't really give like a full picture of how many people really are going to embrace it, because it will take longer time and it will go in stages, but it gives some sense that there is enough of the early adopters, the small group that really is eager to try, pay premium for this. And, at least in countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, China, some of the studies that have been done are showing that there is willingness to embrace it when the product is on the market. When it comes to embracing it by governments, and obviously Singapore is leading the pack in a sense that it improved 2 products from Good Meat. It approved first production facility in Singapore as well. And there are several other companies that are lined up for approval. There are pretty clear guidelines from local regulatory body on what kind of process needs to be followed. And then some of the other countries that are doing some work in this area are Korea, to some extent Japan. A bit is happening in Australia, but none of them is yet, super close to approving. So I wouldn't expect any other country this year to approve cultivated meat. And then the big sort of elephant in the room is China, because it's obviously the biggest market on any dimension, but also for number of animals killed and consumed. So arguably the most important and most impactful. And there are a little bit mixed signals coming from China, but some of the developments are positive. The alternative protein and even specifically cultivated meat is being now mentioned publicly by some of the government officials, including president recently, as at least one of the solutions for food sustainability and food security in the future. So it looks like there might be some moves follow in the next few years. The challenge is that historically China is not very much of a first adopter when it comes to embracing new food products. So for example, GMOs are still mostly banned in China, and it has been very slow in sort of allowing these products in. So it's not entirely clear what will be the timeline of this approval.
That's really interesting to know. Simcha, do you have any comments about that from where you are in Europe? I think you're muted. I think you're still muted. Sorry, Simcha.
Sorry. Yes, I agree with Mikhail, and I would like to add that it is so important that people are well informed, because there are many misconceptions about cell-based meat. And if we want to facilitate a transition towards it, I think that information is really extremely important. People need to be well informed, and we need to make sure that the image of Frankenstein meat, that we get rid of that, because that is really very negative. Also, the way how we visualize it, like for in Europe, if there is spoken about cell-based meat in the media, the picture that is used most of the time, it's the little Petri scale, the man with the white coat behind it, and this is not at all appealing for people who link eating with being together, having a nice time, with tradition. So I think it's really important that we change that image. If we speak about cell-based meat, that we choose nice pictures of people coming together, having the tradition in the picture. It should be another atmosphere, so it's more appealing for people. That is really very important, next to the fact of being informed well, of course.
It's really interesting to know. Yeah, white coat sounds very clinical. Well, when we talk about these changes and the timelines that we're looking at are in the next few decades, I'm just curious about the workforce to support the development and growth of alternative protein. What kind of people are we looking at? More specifically, maybe in Asia for the workforce to transition towards more alternative protein happening in the food system. If the audience is interested in this area, any advice on how they can get started to explore and contribute to accelerating the space? To any speakers who have ideas on this.
All right, okay, so maybe I can share. So one of your question is kind of about how can people get involved in this? Like what are kind of the job opportunities, right?
Yeah, and what can we anticipate in the next few years? The number of jobs and types of jobs.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely, I think there are a lot of companies in the space and they're also hiring. So the number of jobs will increase over time. I think what people can do, I mean, there's, I think, both a need for non-technical and technical talent. I mean, non-technical wise, like people can get in terms of like the marketing, sales, business development, operations, all these like skills are needed. For the technical side, I mean, kind of maybe learning more about food science, learning about bioprocessing, learning about kind of like even like molecular biology, those or even we've also seen people from the pharmaceutical industry transition into alternative protein industry. So I think that there is a lot of like kind of need for technical talent. And the way people can kind of start learning about it is firstly, as a beginner, GFI has a kind of online course that's an introduction to alternative protein that people can take. We also have more technical resources. We recently released like an alternative protein literature library, which shares a lot of like the important papers for you to read to learn more about the science of it. So I think just going to like our gfi.org website, you will see a lot of like reports and resources for you to read up more about the industry. And you can of course join kind of some events. There is also like a careers portal on GFI's website that shares about some of the potential jobs or like what are the current jobs out there. So you can kind of look at that to see, okay, what are the companies hiring for right now? What are the skills they're looking for? And how can I build my skills such that I can suit this kind of jobs in the future? So definitely recommend also checking that out if you want to consider a career in the space.
I would only add that we also need more startups. So if you have more of entrepreneurial streak to you, like definitely consider launching a startup. And we are happy to support investment. There are many other angel investors and venture capital investors that I'm sure will be happy to have a look and support you along the way.
That's great to hear. We have a question on what can activists from animal advocates do more to help. People are quite interested to know how they can contribute to this weekend.
Well, I think that is a very interesting question. I think it is important as an activist to inform yourself well, to know about the objections that consumers or other people might have about cultivated meat or precision fermentation, because what is not known is not accepted. So it is very important that you explain in a comprehensive way what cell-based meat is about, what precision fermentation is about, and that you to people, as Mikael explained in his presentation, that some of these things are not new, like insulin we use for a very long time. We have microbiological stem cell in cheese that we use, that is also precision fermentation. So some of the products are not new. We use them for a very long time and it's completely safe to use them. And on the other part, when things are new, that we explain that it is a logical step to take. Like, we don't use the horse in the carriage anymore. We don't go to the lake to have our ice anymore. So I think that activists, if you can explain it in an easy, accessible way, then it might help to get a bigger acceptance. And I would really recommend the YouTube video from Paul Shapiro. I was surprised about how he is able to, in 10 minutes, to explain it in a very accessible way to people, and to be open-minded about it. It was really an eye-opener for me, because I'm struggling when people ask me, what are you working on and what is cell-based meat? I thought it was not so easy to explain it in a very easy, accessible way, but he does it really in a way that you see people think like, oh yeah, of course, it's crazy to use alive animals to feed them for several months or years and then to kill them. If we have another way, it's like a no-brainer to go for that.
I agree with Simcha. I think awareness is really important, and I think as advocates, while we are still doing farm animal welfare work or based movement work, this really helps when more and more people hear about it. I think that really helps people get warmed up to what this is all about. Any other additional comments from the other two speakers? Seems not. Oh, okay.
Yeah, just briefly, I mean, like I have seen some, depends of course on the organization. Some organizations are sort of limited in their scope, or focus is very important. But if you have extra funding or time or resources, I think one of the programs that I have seen some of organizations running is working with restaurants in respective country to try to encourage them, especially important in emerging markets where awareness is still very low, to try this product, to connect them with the startups, with existing products, and maybe try to incorporate them in the menus. And I'm not talking about vegan restaurants, because this is a easy sell and they probably already have this in the menu, but like general, public, omnivore, general restaurants, just to try it out. And I think some of these programs are quite successful, and this is important to sort of ignite it, especially in emerging markets.
Very interesting to know. So I think Elizabeth has a couple of questions about centralized lists, and I think Sarah is helping her with that. Unfortunately, because of time, we have to end here. And I think, Elizabeth, if you have more questions, I would say maybe ping Valerie. She might have some resources for you over there, or email the organizers for more info. So thank you everyone for your time. And I would like to, on behalf of Asia for Animal Coalition, thank the three speakers for giving us such insightful look into the alternative protein space. I think it's very exciting future that we have for our food system. And I also like to thank on behalf of the audience, Asia for Animals Coalition for organizing this series of talks for us this past weekend now. So thank you everyone for being here today. Wishing you all a very good week. See you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.